And good evening, everyone. This is a bit of an ad hoc episode since, well, I kind of have to because I forgot to do it on Tuesday. Work has been hectic, but you don't need to hear about my problems. So, welcome to episode 22 of the Writer's Workshop. And today, I'm going a little bit off script because I'm a shit and did not prepare one this time. So, today we're going to look at a cool little story that seems to have done well for itself. It's titled Breaking the Cycle by RC2101 underscore Copy. Now, why was this chosen? Well, personally, I've actually been delving a little more into emotional fix. Some of you know this. But furthermore, I'm also curious as to how other people convey strong emotions and what's considered a quote-unquote sad fic. So I've been kind of on a binge with this, and I'm curious as to what this is going to offer. So we have Breaking the Cycle, tagged romance, sad, and with the characters Rainbow Dash and Big Macintosh. And the summary states, every year, for the last 18 years, Mac has made a trip to visit his parents' grave. Every year, he cries himself to sleep, waking up the morning after, feeling just as alone as the night before. But not this year. This year, Mac is going to take his new mare friend, Rainbow Dash, to meet his parents, and she intends to break the cycle. Okay, and it looks like it was written for a Mac Dash challenge. Okay. Now, some first impressions. One, there's a little bit of, I wouldn't say controversy, but a little bit of a debate surrounding the Mac Dash ship, for example. And hold on one second, let me just make sure that this is working quickly. Let me just... And... well, of course, why would it be working? Why the fuck would it be working? Oh, now hosting deflammant warfare. Okay, well, you can eat a dick. There we go. Now it's working. Alright, so, now if that's what I sound like, then Jesus Christ, I'm sorry for you guys. Alright, now, oh yeah, surrounding the Mac Dash ship. I'm a little bit indifferent to it. A lot of people think it's horrendously overdone and have absolutely no tolerance for it. Other people think it's the greatest shit in the world. Well, here's the thing about ships. You can make it all believable. There's very rarely any ships that haven't been done. There are a few notable exceptions. There's a reason because they probably won't work. But this one, well, you make it work well enough. I ship that. So I'm going to ignore that for right now because it's just the assumption that they're together at this point. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Chapter title is The Trip. Alright, so, The Trip. Sit back, relax, and enjoy my sonorous voice. Giggity giggity. Rainbow Dash sat in her haunches, with her forehoof on her chest and her breathing heavy. Twilight had taught her this technique, something passed down from Cadence or something like that. All that mattered to Rainbow right then was that it worked. As she got her breathing back under control, she cast her gaze upon the horizon. The sun had begun its descent, the late autumn sky filled with shifting shades of red. Red, just like her stallion, the reason she was here. Just as quickly. Her feathers ruffled as the wind whipped past her, the scarf around her neck snapping like a flag. Rainbow shivered, but it wasn't from the cold. The sound of heavy but deliberate hoof steps approached her from behind, stopping just to the side of her. "We don't have to do this, if you're not comfortable, darling." He slipped his hooves around her withers and rested his head atop of hers. Withers, I like that. On any normal day, Rainbow would have kicked his flank for such a public display of affection, big or small, but today was no normal day. Releasing his final heavy breath, Rainbow looped her forelegs around Max. "No, I know how much this means to you. It's a part of you, and if I'm to spend my future with you, it needs to become part of me too." Mac didn't say anything, but Rainbow felt him settle into her back, and his muzzle shifted atop her head. She couldn't see it, but she knew Mac was smiling. and she wanted nothing more than to enjoy the feeling of contentment till she fell asleep. But there was something that needed doing. With daylight burning, Rainbow forced her way out of Mac's embrace and turned to face him. "I'm ready. Lead the way." Nodding, Mac turned and headed down the path, pausing only to allow his blue companion to catch up. The road led them out of town, and the lowering sun cast shadows across their path. Neither said anything as they approached their destination. Nothing needed to be. The grass grew wilder this far out of town, until the pair passed an invisible boundary. Then the grass became short and well-groomed, and it wasn't long before they passed through a wrought iron gateway. God damn it. Rainbow Dash shivered again, a cold chill running down her spine, and she moved herself closer to Mac. Following a route ingrained in his very being, Mac led them around the fence line, before turning off and walking a short ways in. Rainbow felt her breath quicken again, before a calming hoof settled onto her shoulder. "I'll go first." Mac moved with a hitherto unseen grace, before he sat down, facing two gray stones. "Hey, Ma. Hey, Pa. Farm's doing well. I managed to finally get that south field to grow some. Granted, it ain't apples, but folks around here need a little variety, and I know this corn will grow well. I can feel it. You should have seen the cider hall this year, what with AJ's friends pitching in it again. Largest batch we ever made, almost double from 5 years ago. Yup. Oh, and Bloom went and got her cutie mark a few months back. Reckon I should have told you sooner. Her and the Crusader pals went and got matching ones, all at the same time." Max sniffled loudly, his hoof slowly wiping across his eyes. You should have been there." And then the dam broke. The usually stoic stallion collapsed on the ground and wrapped his hooves across his muzzle. Mac's brain was overwhelmed. His emotions ran amok. Every year he made the same trip, and every year he was reduced to an emotional wreck, who would lay in the dirt until he cried himself to sleep. This year was different. Before he could react, Mac found himself wrapped in 4 blue hooves, and he felt a warm breath tickle his ears. He knew his family loved him, and he loved them. But when he came here each year, he always felt alone. This year was different. His heart soared, practically leaping to his hooves. He steadied Rainbow and cleared his throat. "Ma, Pa, I'm not gonna lie. I miss you so much, and as each year goes by, and I see more of you both, is AJ and Apple Bloom. I miss you more. I love them. And of that there's no doubt, but I can't deny your passing left a hole in my heart." Tears were flowing freely to the ground, but Mac didn't care. "But something amazing has happened. Something that, a year ago, I would have said was impossible, but I've gone and found myself not just a mare, but the best mare any stallion could ask for. She's strong, independent, and loyal to her core. And even though she may deny it, she's beautiful to boot." His smile threatened to split his face open. "And the weird thing? She's the fastest Pegasus alive, born to rule the skies, and yet it's her that keeps me grounded. A hole in my heart that may never fully heal, but I bet my collar she's the only mare that can give it a good shot." Grinning from ear to ear, he pulled his companion into a side hug and thrust her forward slightly. "Ma, Pa, I'd like you to meet Rainbow Dash." Still blushing heavily from Mac's heartfelt confession, Rainbow bowed her head in a greeting. "It's nice to meet you both," she grimaced at her own words. I'm glad to have finally met you." She fidgeted, her wings twitching, and her eyes darted about looking for an escape route. It all started when she felt Mac loop a leg over her withers. She immediately felt calm, and at the same time strong enough to take on the world. Nuzzling into Mac's shoulder, she found the strength to go on. "1 second, gotta sneeze. Muting." Jesus Christ. I haven't heard much about the two of you, and please don't be mad at Mac or AJ for that. Talking about this sort of thing is hard for any pony, but what I do know is you must have been a pair of outstanding ponies. the kids you left behind or anything to go by, but I swear, here and now, I'm going to find out everything about you I can and visit every year with Mac. She heard the stallion next to her start sniffling again. Forget what Mac said about me. It's me who's lucky. Whatever you guys did, you did it right. Mac is the strongest, most dependable pony I've ever met. Just don't tell AJ, she's a close second. But like me, she hates losing. I've never met a pony who makes me feel the same way. Not just safe, but like I've found a place in the world. I thought I achieved my life's dream when I made the Wonderbolts display team, but I still felt hollow. Max says he thinks I'll fill the hole inside of his heart, and that's fine. It just means I have my work cut out for me, but I know he's going to fill the same emptiness inside mine. By this point, Max's entire frame was hitching from the soundless crying, and Rainbow extended a wing across his back. You did a wonderful job instilling your values into your children, and I'm going to learn everything you did. And if Mac plays his cards right, he might just get to work with me to pass them on to another generation. Coughing and sputtering, Mac lost his balance and fell over. Rainbow still had her wing over him, and she was dragged down with him. The big stallion lay there, still sputtering, unable to respond, while the blue mare rolled around laughing her mane off. It took a few minutes, but Mac managed to regain control of his own body, and he moved to lay on his front hooves. Her face starting to hurt, Rainbow finally ceased laughing and crawled on top of Mac. "You mean what you said?" Mac asked. Turned his neck to face his back. "I am so sorry for that. I'm so sorry you had to hear that." Mac asked, turned his neck to face his passenger. A rosy tint returned to her muzzle. "Well, not for a few years, but yeah, I do." She quickly buried her face in Mac's mane. Mac smiled. It wasn't a big smile, but one of contentment. "Hold on, did any of you actually hear that?" "Nope, it's just fucking Enigma." "Okay, cool." "You know, they're gonna hold you to that, right?" Mac pointed towards the gravestones. "I think I want them to." A voice came from above him. Looking up, he found Rainbow had shuffled forwards and was peering down from above. "Now that's what they want to see." Mac looked at her quizzically. "Your smile, doofus. They don't want you to come here every year to cry your eyes out. They want to see you smile." He thought it over before he hummed his approval and nodded his head. Just as Rainbow hopped back onto her hooves, the sun took its final bow and disappeared below the horizon. The moon ascended from the opposite horizon and cast a silver glow across the land as Luna's light hit the gravestones around them. They lit up with an almost ethereal glow. Rainbow gasped. "Wow, Mac, did you know about this?" He shook his head. "I'm a bit ashamed to say, but I've usually cried myself to sleep by this point. Well, I, for one, take it as a good omen." She pulled Mac to his hooves. "Look." Mac followed the blue forelimb, casting his gaze until it fell upon his parents' gravestones. They glowed far brighter than any of the others. A pair of fireflies flew around them, appearing as A pair of fireflies flew around them, appearing as if they were dancing, taking a lazy route. The flying motes of light flew over suddenly, catching them both off guard. One firefly landed on Mac's nose, the other on Rainbow's. As quickly as they had come, they left, darting off and disappearing behind the hedgerow. Mac stood there, eyes fixed at where the lights had disappeared, his nose tickling slightly where one had landed. His eyes darted forward. His nose was suddenly tickling again. He had found that Rainbow had put her muzzle up against his. Feeling that it was his turn to surprise her, he pulled her into a deep kiss, only breaking away when he needed air. He looked down. Rainbow was now a blue puddle on the floor, her face now scarlet. Turning back to the gravestones, he smiled. "Ma? Pa? It's good seeing you again, but I better get Miss Stash home. I seem to have broken her." He lifted Rainbow onto his back, reveling in the now familiar warmth. "Ma? Pa? We'll see you next year." He bowed his head for a few seconds before stepping back and heading home. He had never felt so loved. Okay, and that marks the end. So, before we continue, I would like to just put forth my normal disclaimer that I, for some reason, forgot to do in the beginning. Said disclaimer is that what I say here in regards to praise and criticisms is not but my own of my own experiences, my own thoughts, and to some degree my own opinions, all rooted in some manner in some objective undertone. Again, I'm just one asshole, so your mileage may vary. And with that out of the way, I would like to start off with things that I didn't necessarily care for, or don't like. One thing, or number one rather, is basic editing. Now, imagery was fine, the general pace was good, but I personally felt that this could have used another glance over. There were a lot of very simple grammar mistakes, very simple spelling mistakes, basic things in the English language that are just annoying to check for but needs to be done. Lead versus lead, vice versa, things like that. And although a lot of people never put that much stock into it, something as simple as just dotting the end of your sentence, putting a period where you forgot to, can often make the world of difference. Well, I shouldn't say the world of difference, but it makes a noticeable difference. One thing I learned from my occupation is that if you format things correctly and make sure your formatting is good 100%, no missing things, numbers are all the same format, same number of significant digits, consistent all around, those in power are more likely to trust your work and see it as something good to be looked forward to versus questioning it. If it's sloppy, people are going to question the veracity of it. You don't want that. So, a basic editing job goes a long way. Secondly, what I don't like is part of Rainbow Dash's characterization. Now, one thing that people often forget when it comes to dialogue in any kind of fictional, non-fictional writing is that within the quotation marks, the rules of grammar are exempt. The rules of spelling aren't exempt necessarily, depending on what you're trying to say. But the rules of grammar and most rules of spelling dialogue is exempt from them. For example, we know how Big Mac talks. We know how Apple Bloom talks. Or talk, rather. They are not going to pronounce the words like this with every single enunciation in the proper place, nor use rather confounding vocabulary such as this. No, they speak simpler. They use apostrophes where proper language shouldn't. In terms of Rainbow Dash, we know how Rainbow Dash is characterized in the story. She, quote-unquote, hates egghead things. She, again, would likely not pronounce the words with each and every syllable enunciated like this. She would make heavy use of things like dude, girl, big guy, especially big guy. Yeah, okay. But, so, it got better as the story went on, but in the beginning it didn't always feel like Rainbow Dash was talking or even Big Mac was talking until the appropriate inflections, such as here, could just use an apostrophe right here, were made known. Which kind of segues into my third point. So, recap, second point is characterization, appropriate characterization. This segues into my third point, which is dialogue, formatting, rather. Now, a very special person in my life gave me a quick rundown of how dialogue should kind of be formatted in a fiction or in a story, is that when you're reading a conversation, when you're reading lots of dialogue, you want to make it as easy to read as possible. There are a couple stories on this site that a few of us know well. It almost looks like that every other sentence is its own paragraph, especially when it comes to dialogue. When I first started writing, I thought this was the weirdest thing. It's like, why the fuck is there so much white space? Like, what's the point of this? Like, make paragraphs. But then that's just kind of the point, is that like the 3-sentence rule from Paragraphs or whatever bullshit you learned in English doesn't actually really apply that much. When you're reading something that's not a scholarly work, when it's something for pleasure, you want it as easy to read as possible. And ask yourself, what is easier to read? Say if this entire thing right here was one single paragraph. Hell, say, because I've actually seen worse than that, say all of this was one single paragraph. Is a wall of text easier to read than simply separating out each individual idea, even if it's only one sentence? Especially when it comes to dialogue. Theoretically, each level of dialogue should be on a separate line. There are some exceptions, and sometimes it does look better in the same paragraph. But proper dialogue spacing and formatting makes it clear who's talking. And oftentimes I didn't exactly know who was talking because there was no indication of this. So, again, that kind of breaks the immersion for the reader. We don't want to do that. You break immersion for the reader, it's not believable anymore. And if your story's not believable for the reader, what's the fucking point? So, those are really the only 3 things that I found weird or that I didn't particularly care for. But things that I do like. One is the whole Batman dead parents thing has kind of been like overblown. It's been overdone, but this one went pretty light-handed with it. It added another dimension of Rainbow Dash being involved in this, and that's kind of cool. And yeah, I felt it didn't try to force me to feel anything other than the sometimes odd characterization. It felt more of a take from it what you will, and I appreciated that. No, not trying to shove any emotions down my throat like some other stories have. So, good show. I did like the pacing. The pacing felt very natural. No odd time skips, no weird shit. And yeah, that sounds a little vague, but honestly, no. Good pacing. Very good pacing. Makes for a much more believable story. And overall, I think that's pretty good. It makes it a little better because since this story was written in 2016, and now we kind of know from this past season what kind of happened, so to speak, or the backstory of it, it fits well. It doesn't seem like anything should be retconned from the story. Perhaps that's just luck, but overall, nothing felt out of place. So, ways to improve regarding this is pretty much going back to my 3 points. Firstly, and I can't stress this enough, I cannot stress this enough. 1, read your own fucking work. Don't just read your work, read it out loud. You may read your work silently. You may read your work silently multiple times. You may reread and read multiple drafts of your same work. But read it out loud. Before you give it to someone else, read it out loud for yourself. Notice how, when I was reading it, I stumbled in certain areas, and I guarantee you will stumble in some areas as well if you enunciate your words clearly for yourself. You will find things that you never thought were there, that you would have just glossed over because they made visual sense to your eyes. Read your story out loud, and it'll probably take care of most grammatical things. And if you don't want to read all of it out loud, plug this shit into Microsoft Word. It's got good text prediction and corrections. Number 2 is to really practice with characterization. Good characterization makes or breaks the story. It's a huge pillar. If you have Twilight talking gangster-like, and if that's not a part of a crack fic that you're doing, it's not going to make any sense. Further, if Rainbow Dash is acting all frou-frou and has like the greatest lexicon since Princess Luna, well, that's not going to work either. Know the characters you're writing. I'm going to repeat that again. Know the characters you're writing. And that's all there is to it. Thirdly, experiment with dialogue. I wouldn't say that the dialogue is necessarily bad here, because it's really not, compared to a lot of the things we've read in the shitfix section, whether they were troll fix or not, or actually serious attempts. Dialogue placement is key. If even mentally the reader is jumping around trying to figure out who the fuck is talking, it's not enjoyable anymore. I don't want to work to read this story, goddammit. I came home from work. It was a rough day. Got bent over a table, maybe literally. And I just want to come home, put some Preparation H on my bunghole, sit my ass on my chair, and just read a good story. I don't want to work for this. I want my eyes to lazily roam over the words while I shove shit in my mouth. That's what I want to do. If I have to work to make things make sense from your story, not saying that this does that, but if I have to do that, I'm not gonna fucking read it after 2 paragraphs. And I'm sure most people wouldn't either. So, properly space your things. Learn what works best for you and for the readers when it comes to dialogue. There really, to a point, there really isn't anything bad in separating things out. Wall of texts are not, this isn't English school this isn't English class research papers. The length of the paragraph honestly doesn't fucking matter. Don't make it too long. Make it short. Make it 1 sentence if you have to. And remember the rules around dialogue. So, based on that, this was a nice little story overall. A few niggles here and there, as you undoubtedly heard me after all of this. But overall, I'll give it a good 6.5, 7 out of 10. That being said, I believe that's really all I have to say. You've heard me talk enough. So, this has been episode 22 of the Writer's Workshop. I've been your host, Flammenwerfer, and I hope you have a splendid evening, ladies and gents. Have a good night.